Once we have created the pyruvate or the pyruvic acid in glycolysis, the next step we need to decide, are we going to have oxygen or are we going to have to proceed without oxygen? If there is no oxygen available, then the next path is going to be fermentation. So here we are going to break that pyruvic acid down either with a type of bacteria or yeast or some type of other fungus, and that's going to make lactic acid. So with lactic acid fermentation, that pyruvic acid simply adds two hydrogens and becomes lactic acid. So if we look here, we can see glycolysis has occurred, glucose turns into pyruvate. Then if we look at this molecule, we've got two carbons, three oxygens, and then CH3. If we just add two hydrogens onto that with the use of NADH, it turns into lactate or lactic acid. Lactic acid is used to produce lots of things that we really enjoy. So cheeses, buttermilk, yogurt, sour cream are all made through lactic acid fermentation. So if we look at this, glucose, glycolysis turns into pyruvate. Then depending on what type, these are just different types of fungus, they can make different things. So here with lactic acid, we might have soy sauce with this type of fungus. We might make our yogurts and cheeses, or we might have a different type of fermentation that we're not making lactic acid, and we might make alcohol. And so alcohol can be used in what we typically think of as alcoholic beverages or breads. Looking again at lactic acid, our muscles use lactic acid fermentation as well. If maybe we've been working out and we're so winded, we're not getting the oxygen that our body needs, then our muscles begin, instead of using oxygen, resulting to lactic acid fermentation, and lactic acid starts to build up in our muscles. And if you think about kind of a traditional thought of acid as something that burns, that'll help you remember lactic acid is what causes the burn in my muscle if I'm worn out, because that's building up. And it builds up, and then ultimately it's going to go into our blood and then go into our liver and get converted back to pyruvic acid and then transported out of our body. So it's not going to stay there forever. Alcoholic fermentation is another type of fermentation if we don't go towards lactic acid fermentation. Here, we're going to turn that pyruvate or pyruvic acid into ethyl alcohol. So where lactic acid added on hydrogens, alcoholic fermentation is going to take off this CO2 on the end, leaving two carbons, four hydrogens, and an oxygen. Then we're going to add that hydrogen from two NADH molecules, so we'll have two more hydrogens added, and this makes ethanol, which is a type of alcohol. So alcoholic fermentation can produce alcoholic beverages, but it also produces bread. So yeast that produces carbon dioxide and bubbles that smells so good when you're making fresh bread, that is a type of alcoholic fermentation.